Today the boring story name is The Rainy Night in the Tent. Who liked this video, please subscribe, like, comment and share it to all your friends, thanks a lot. Part 1, the first droplet hit the nylon roof of the tent with a soft clip. It was a solitary, tentative sound. Then another. And another, until the clip became a patter, and the patter swelled into a steady, soothing rhythm. For Maya, curled inside her sleeping bag, it was the sound of the world wrapping her in a cocoon. She had pitched the tent herself that afternoon in a small, clear glade surrounded by tall, whispering pines. The air had been heavy with the promise of rain, a metallic scent that made everything feel charged and alive. Now, inside her tiny dome of fabric and moonlight-turned shadow, she was safe. The rain was not a disruption, it was the main event. A small battery-powered lantern, set on its lowest setting, cast a warm, golden pool of light around her. It illuminated the intricate pattern of the tent seams, her well-thumbed book lying beside her, and the steam curling from a mug of forgotten herbal tea. Every time the wind gusted, the tent walls would suck inwards with a gentle sigh, then bulge out again, making the shadow of a pine branch dance across the ceiling. Maya let out a deep breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The city, with its constant hum of traffic and flickering screens, felt a million miles away. Here, there was only this, the symphony of rain, the scent of damp earth and wet canvas, the cozy fortress of her own making. She snuggled deeper into the plush sleeping bag, its lining soft against her cheek. This was perfection. This was peace. As the rain settled into a relentless, gentle pour, her eyelids began to feel heavy. The sound wasn't loud, it was a blanket, muffling the rest of the world, telling her it was okay to let go, to drift. The forest was keeping watch. She was safe, she was dry, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. Part 2, just as Maya hovered on the edge of sleep, a new sound threaded its way through the rain's white noise. A soft, hesitant scratch at the base of the tent flap, near the zipper door. Her eyes fluttered open. Not fear, but curiosity stirred in her chest. It was too gentle for anything large. She lay perfectly still, listening. The scratching came again, accompanied by a tiny, almost inaudible shiver of the fabric. Slowly, moving so as not to make a single rustle from her sleeping bag, Maya propped herself up on one elbow. The lantern light made the world outside the tent fabric an impenetrable dark wall, but the source of the sound was right there, at the threshold of her cozy home. Scritch. Pause. Scritch. Hello, she whispered into the dim light, her voice barely a breath. The scratching stopped instantly. There was a moment of pure, waiting silence, filled only by the rain's steady drumming. Then, a small, wet sniff. Something was definitely out there, and it was just as curious about her as she was about it. Maya considered. The rules of camping said to never invite wildlife into your space, but this visitor sounded small, possibly lost, and definitely damp. With careful, deliberate movements, she unzipped the inner mesh screen of the tent door, just a few inches. The cool, rain-fresh air washed in, smelling of pine needles and petrichor. She didn't open the waterproof rain fly. Instead, she peered through the mesh into the darkness. At first, she saw nothing but the blurred shapes of wet ferns. Then, two tiny pinpricks of reflected light appeared, low to the ground. They gleamed for a second before vanishing as the creature blinked. "Are you stuck out there?" Maya whispered. The creature let out a soft, high-pitched sound that was neither a growl nor a whine, but something in between, a question. It was a sound that belonged to this rainy night, a part of its music. Maya smiled. Her cozy night now had a mysterious guest. Part 3, the eyes at the mesh door blinked again, then disappeared. Maya held her breath, listening. A small, shuffling movement followed, and then a tiny, pointed muzzle, dark and glistening with rain, pressed tentatively against the mesh. It sniffed rapidly, making the fine material quiver. It was a fox kit. A very young, very drenched fox kit. Its fur, what she could see of it, was plastered dark to its small skull, and its ears lay flat and soggy against its head. It didn't seem afraid of the light or her presence, just profoundly curious and very, very wet. Maya's heart melted. "Oh, you little drowned rat," she whispered, her voice full of soft concern. The kit let out another tiny, chittering sound. Remembering her camping guidelines, she knew she shouldn't lure it inside, but she couldn't leave it shivering in the downpour. Thinking quickly, she slowly reached for her small backpack and pulled out her compact, fleece-lined sit pad. It was dry and warm. Moving with exaggerated slowness so as not to startle the tiny creature, she unzipped the mesh door a little wider and slid the sit pad just outside the tent, under the small awning created by the rainfly. It was a sheltered spot, protected from the direct rain but still outside her living space. "Here," she murmured. "A dry spot. Just for you." The kit watched her hand retreat, then stared at the bright blue pad. It took one cautious step forward, then another, its tiny paws leaving minute-dark prints on the fabric. It sniffed the fleece, circled once, and then, with a sigh that seemed to come from its very bones, it curled into a tight, dripping ball right in the center of the pad, its nose tucked under its sodden tail. Maya watched, a deep sense of peace settling over her. The rain continued its melody, the lantern glowed, and now, just a mesh door away, a small wild creature had accepted her offering of shelter. She zipped the mesh closed, leaving only a couple of inches open at the bottom for air. She wasn't alone. She had a guardian, and she was a guardian in return. Lying back down, she kept her head turned towards her small guest, listening to the rain and the soft, almost imperceptible sound of a fox kit's breathing as it finally slept, dry and safe. Part 4, Maya must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, the quality of the sound had changed. The rain had softened from a relentless pour to a gentle, sporadic dripping from the pine boughs overhead. The world was holding its breath. And there was a new sound, a soft, rhythmic tap-tap-tap against the tense rainfly. She opened her eyes. The lantern light had grown dimmer, but it was enough to see the fox kit was awake. It was sitting up on the fleece pad, head cocked, listening intently to the tap-tap sound. It wasn't rain. It was too deliberate. Maya sat up slowly. The kit glanced at her, its ears swiveling forward, then back to the source of the sound. Tap. Pause. Tap tap. It was coming from the other side of the tent, near the back wall. Something was out there, communicating. The kit let out a quiet, whimpering chirp in response. A deeper, softer chewing sound answered from the darkness. A sound of recognition, of reassurance. Maya's breath caught. The mother. The vixen had found them. The kit became agitated, shuffling on the pad, looking from Maya to the tent wall and back. It wanted to go, but the mesh door was between it and its mother. Maya didn't hesitate. This was the reunion that needed to happen. "Okay, little one," she whispered. "Time to go home." She carefully unzipped the entire mesh door panel. The cool, post-rain air, fresh and clean, flooded in. The kit didn't need a second invitation. With one last look at Maya, a look that felt like a thank you, it darted off the fleece pad and vanished into the deep, wet shadows of the ferns. Maya heard a soft rustle, a few more gentle chirrs, and then silence. They were gone. A mix of happiness and sweet loneliness washed over her. Her mysterious guest had moved on. She pulled the damp fleece pad back inside and zipped the tent shut. The forest felt different now, not empty, but complete. She had been part of a small, perfect story. The cozy tent felt just for her again, but the memory of the shared shelter warmed the space. The dripping from the trees continued, a slower, quieter lullaby. Part 5, after the fox kit's departure, a profound stillness settled in the glade, deeper than before. The rain had completely ceased. Maya lay back, but sleep felt far away. Her heart was full of the night's quiet magic. She listened to the new music. The plink-plunk of water droplets falling from leaf to leaf, the distant gurgle of a stream now swollen with rain, the occasional sigh of a releasing branch. Then, a new layer added itself to the symphony. A soft, melodic chirping began, tentative at first, then gaining confidence. Another joined in, then another, until a chorus of crickets and peepers filled the damp air, celebrating the passing of the storm. It was a joyful, vibrant sound that made Maya smile in the darkness. The world was waking up again. She decided to meet it. Unzipping the tent door fully, she crawled out into the night. The air was chilly and smelled unbelievably fresh, a blend of wet soil, crushed pine needles, and clean oxygen. Above, the clouds were breaking apart, revealing patches of a deep velvet sky dusted with a handful of brilliant stars. A sliver of moon peeked through, casting a faint, silvery sheen on the millions of water droplets clinging to every blade of grass, every needle, every fern. The forest glittered. Maya stood there, barefoot on the cool, wet earth, and simply breathed it in. Her cozy tent, glowing softly behind her, was a haven she had created. But this glittering, singing, alive world was the reason she had come. She felt a part of it, not just an observer, but a participant in its rhythms. She had offered shelter, witnessed a reunion, and now was audience to its glorious aftermath. She spent a long moment just looking up at the stars through the dripping pine canopy. The peace she felt was no longer just the peace of shelter, but the peace of connection. With a contented sigh, she finally turned back to her golden-lit tent. The night was still for sleeping, and her story here was not over. It was simply waiting for dawn. Part 6, back inside the tent, the air felt different. It was still cozy, but now it was infused with the sharp, clean scent of the forest after rain. Maya left the mesh door open, secured by the inner zip, so the symphony of crickets and dripping trees could fill her space. She relit her camp stove, its blue flame a tiny, focused sun, and set a small pot of water to boil. This was her favorite ritual, a pre-dawn cup of tea, a silent communion with the waking world. As the water heated with a gentle hiss, she wrapped her hands around her knees and watched the world through the mesh. The darkness outside was no longer a solid wall, but a deep, textured gray, hinting at shapes of trees and ferns. The stars in the visible patches of sky seemed to pulse brighter in the cooler air. The water began to sing a soft, rising note. She poured it over a chamomile tea bag in her mug, and the scent of apples and flowers bloomed, mingling perfectly with the petrichor. Holding the warm ceramic between her palms, she took the first sip. Heat spread through her chest, a comforting counterpoint to the chill on her face from the open door. She thought of the fox kid, hopefully curled up warm and dry with its mother in some hidden den. The memory felt like a secret gift, a story that belonged only to her and the forest. The night's adventure had shifted something inside her, smoothing away the last lingering edges of city stress. Here, with her tea and the listening dark, there was no past, no future. Only this rich, present moment. The cricket chorus began to slow, individual chirps dropping out, leaving space for the next act of the dawn. Maya smiled into her steam. The night was gently turning, and she was awake to see it. Part 7, as Maya finished her tea, the first bird called. It was a single, clear note, a question tossed into the silvery gloom from high in a pine. A moment of absolute silence followed, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then, from a different direction, an answer, a trilling, bubbling melody that seemed to trickle down through the branches like water. The dawn chorus had begun. More voices joined, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Sparrows chirped, a distant owl gave a final, soft hoo, and a woodpecker tapped a staccato rhythm on a hollow trunk far away. The gray light outside the mesh door was now unmistakably softening, gaining a faint blush of peach at its edges. Maya set her empty mug aside and crawled to the door, resting her chin on her arms as she watched the world transform. The dripping from the trees took on a crystalline quality, each drop catching the nascent light. The ferns, which had been dark shapes, now revealed their intricate, lacy patterns. A spider's web, strung between two fronds, became visible, bejeweled with 100 perfect, liquid pearls. She felt a swell of gratitude so profound it was almost aching. This daily miracle, so often slept through, was unfolding just for her. The air moving through the mesh was no longer night-chilled, but fresh and cool, carrying the promise of day. The sounds were no longer the secretive noises of night creatures, but the open, declarative songs of day-dwellers staking their claim. Her cozy tent was no longer a shelter against darkness, but a front-row seat to creation. She didn't move, unwilling to break the spell. She was a witness, and it was enough. Part 8, a sliver of brilliant, molten gold finally broke above the distant tree line, slicing through the mist that rose from the damp forest floor. The world exploded into color. The gray turned to green, the peach deepened to fiery orange, and the droplets on every surface blazed like scattered diamonds. Maya gasped softly. It was one thing to know a sunrise was happening, it was another to be immersed in it, to feel the first direct sunbeam cut through the cool air and paint a warm stripe across her outstretched hand. The light reached her tent, turning the gray nylon into a glowing amber shell. The chorus of birds became a joyous, deafening racket. It was no longer tentative, it was a full-throated celebration of the new day. Maya laughed aloud, the sound feeling natural and right amidst the din. The night's deep peace was transforming into daytime's vibrant energy. Knowing this precious, fleeting moment was the pinnacle, she slowly began her morning ritual. She unzipped the sleeping bag and changed into her day clothes, the fabric cool against her skin. She packed her sleeping bag into its sack, deflated her sleeping pad, and folded her blanket. Each task was done slowly, reverently, a way to prolong her connection to the glade. She kept looking outside. A squirrel, bold in the new light, scampered down a pine trunk, sending a shower of glittering drops to the forest floor. A ray of sun illuminated a patch of moss so vividly green it looked electric. Her tent, her cozy home for the night, was now just a bundle of fabric and poles, but it held the entire memory of the rainy night within its seams. Packing it up wouldn't erase that. The memory was hers to keep. Part 9, with her belongings neatly packed, Maya took down the tent. She pulled up the pegs, their dull thunk as they left the soft earth a familiar sound. She collapsed the poles, their elastic cords retracting with a series of soft clicks. Finally, she folded the damp nylon fabric, feeling the cool moisture on her fingers. It smelled of rain, earth, and adventure. She packed everything into her backpack, hefting its familiar, comforting weight onto her shoulders. But she wasn't ready to leave the glade just yet. She walked to the center of the small clearing, now bathed in full, dappled sunlight. The ground was soft and springy underfoot. She looked at the exact spot where her tent had been. The grass was slightly flattened, and there, pressed into the damp earth, was a perfect, tiny paw print. A smile touched her lips. Proof. It hadn't been a dream. Next to it, she noticed a few strands of reddish fur caught on a blade of grass. Carefully, she knelt and picked up one of the fine, soft strands. She held it up, and the sun caught it, turning it into a filament of copper light. This was her souvenir, more precious than any postcard. She tucked it carefully into the clear window of her compass, a tiny piece of wildness to guide her home. She took one last, slow look around. At the glittering pine boughs, the sun-warmed ferns, the now steaming spiderweb. She listened to the confident birdsong and the distant stream. She breathed in the green, sunlit air. The glade had shared its secrets with her, and she was leaving it as she found it, just a little more loved. With a final, grateful nod to the empty space where her tent had been, she turned and found the trailhead, her steps light on the path leading home. Part 10, the hike out felt different from the hike in. Yesterday, her mind had been full of lists and city noise she was trying to leave behind. Today, Her mind was quiet, expansive, like the forest itself. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, painting moving patterns on the path ahead. The air was warm now, buzzing with insects and alive with birdsong. Maya walked slowly, not out of tiredness, but out of a desire to savor every last step. She passed familiar landmarks. The giant cedar with the lightning scar, the mossy boulder shaped like a sleeping bear, the small wooden bridge over the now roaring stream. Each one felt like an old friend, a part of her story now. As she neared the trailhead, the sounds of the forest began to gently merge with the distant, faint hum of the waking world beyond, a car on a far-off road, the faint echo of a plane. Instead of feeling like an intrusion, it felt like a gentle transition, a bridge between two worlds. She reached the edge of the woods and stepped out into the parking lot, blinking in the unbroken sunlight. Her small car sat alone, dusted with pollen and dew. She slid her heavy pack off her shoulders with a grunt, a familiar and satisfying end to a journey. Before opening the car door, she turned and looked back at the path disappearing into the deep green shadows. She could still smell the pine and damp earth on her clothes. She could still feel the memory of the rain on the tent, the tiny eyes at the mesh, the glitter of the dawn. She placed her hand over the pocket where her compass, with its red strand of fur, lay. The cozy night was over, but the peace it had given her was not. It was packed neatly in her heart, as real and tangible as the gear in her backpack. She started the car, the engine sounding oddly loud, and drove away from the forest, carrying its quiet magic with her into the sunny day. Part 11. The highway hummed beneath the tires, a monotonous contrast to the forest symphony. Maya rolled down the window, letting the rushing air mix with the lingering scent of pine on her jacket. The fields and towns she passed were pretty in the sunlight, but her mind's eye kept replaying the silver dance of rain on nylon, the feel of cool, damp earth under bare feet. She stopped at a small roadside diner for a late breakfast. Sitting in a vinyl booth, the clatter of plates and murmur of conversations felt strangely distant, like watching a play from the back row. She ordered pancakes and ate them slowly, savoring the sweetness, but her real hunger was for the quiet she had left behind. The memory was a bubble of serenity inside her, protecting her from the diner's noise. She caught herself smiling at nothing, her finger tracing the shape of a raindrop on the cool formica table. The waitress refilled her coffee with a friendly nod, but Maya's thoughts were miles away, in a glittering, wet glade. Part 12. Back in her apartment, the silence felt different. It was empty, not peaceful. She dumped her backpack in the hallway, and the smell of damp gear and forest immediately began to fill the small space. It was a good smell. Methodically, she began her post-trip ritual. Hauling the tent into the bathtub to rinse off the mud, hanging the damp fleece pad over the balcony railing, laying her sleeping bag out to air. Each item held a memory. The tent fabric, now slack in the tub, had been her drumskin roof. The fleece pad had cradled a wild heart. As she cleaned, she wasn't just removing dirt, she was preserving the experience. The chore became a meditation. The water running over the tent was clear, not rain, but it served the same purpose, a cleansing. By the time she was done, her apartment no longer felt empty. It was filled with the tangible evidence of her journey, slowly drying in the afternoon sun that slanted through the windows. Part 13. That night, Maya's own bed felt almost too soft, too quiet. The city's nocturnal sounds, a distant siren, the rumble of a late-night bus, were a poor substitute for the cricket chorus. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling. On a whim, she got up and fetched her phone, finding a long recording of steady, gentle rain. She plugged in her speaker, turned it low, and hit play. The synthesized rain was not the same, not by a mile. It lacked the depth, the random percussion of a heavy drop hitting a leaf, the sigh of the wind. But as she lay back down in the dark, her mind began to fill in the gaps. The memory was so vivid it overlaid the digital sound. She could feel the cool air, see the lanterns glow on the seams. She imagined the soft scratch at the door, the tiny eyes. The recording became a trigger, a key to a room in her mind where the rainy night lived, perfectly preserved. Finally, lulled by memory more than sound, she drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. Part 14. A week later, Maya was at her desk, immersed in the blue light of her computer screen, wrestling with a complex spreadsheet. A frustration was building behind her eyes. She stopped, sat back, and closed them. Instantly, she was transported. Not to the whole night, but to one perfect, crystalline moment. Just after the rain stopped, when she stood barefoot on the wet earth, looking up at the stars through the dripping pines. The feeling of the cool air on her skin, the immense, glittering quiet. She opened her eyes. The spreadsheet was still there, the numbers just as stubborn. But the knot of tension in her shoulders had loosened. The memory was a tool now, a secret well of calm she could draw from. She took a deep breath, imagining it was full of petrichor, and turned back to her work. The problem hadn't changed, but her capacity to handle it had. The forest had given her not just a night, but a refuge she could carry anywhere. Part 15. Maya decided the memory deserved a physical form. She bought a simple, beautiful frame. In it, she didn't place a photograph, she had been too immersed to take any. Instead, she created a small collage. In the center, she pressed the fox-fur strand compass. Around it, she glued a small square of the clean tent fabric, a tiny sketch of a pine cone she'd drawn on a napkin at the diner, and a few words she'd written in her journal that morning: safe, dry, connected. It was abstract, a map of a feeling. She hung it on the wall opposite her favorite reading chair. Now, when she looked up from a book, it was there. A touchstone. It didn't scream adventure, it whispered peace. It reminded her that coziness wasn't just a physical state of soft blankets and warm drinks, but a state of the soul, a feeling of being exactly where you need to be, whether in a tent in a storm or in a chair in your own home, holding a memory close. Part 16. The seasons turned. The memory of the rainy night stayed, a constant, gentle warmth. One crisp autumn afternoon, Maya found herself gifting the story. A friend was overwhelmed, stressed, and came over for tea. They sat in the reading chair, and her friend's eyes kept drifting to the strange, framed collage. "What's that?" her friend asked. "A night I'll never forget," Maya said. And she told the story. She described the plip of the first drop, the golden lantern light, the scratch at the door, the glittering dawn. As she spoke, she watched her friend's shoulders relax, her breathing slow. The friend's eyes lost their frantic edge, becoming soft and imagining. "It sounds perfect," her friend sighed, a true smile touching her face for the first time that visit. Maya realized then that the gift of that night was not finite. It was a story, and stories grow when shared. The cozy tent now existed in her friend's imagination too, a new sanctuary she could visit in her mind. The magic had multiplied. Part 17. Winter arrived, bringing its own kind of silence to the city, a muffled, snow-blanketed quiet. One evening, a fierce wind howled outside Maya's window, hurling sleet against the glass. Instead of feeling trapped, Maya felt a surge of cozy recognition. This was a different kind of storm, but the principle was the same: a fierce outside, a safe inside. She replicated the ritual. She lit every candle she owned, turning off the electric lights. She made a fort of blankets and pillows on the sofa, her own indoor tent. She made cocoa and put on the rain sounds. Curled in her nest, watching the candle flames dance and the sleet streak the dark window, she felt the same deep contentment. The specific place didn't matter. The feeling did. She had learned to build her cozy tent anywhere, out of intention and memory. The storm outside was just another part of the music. Part 18. Spring came again, and with it, a deep, familiar itch in Maya's feet. It was time. She pulled her gear from the closet. The smell, even now, was faintly of forest. She inspected everything, re-waterproofed the tent seams, tested the lantern, recharged the power bank. The ritual of preparation was part of the joy. This time, she packed something extra. A small, soft toy fox, a silly impulse buy she'd found at a thrift store. It would be a token, a reminder of her first mysterious guest. As she packed, she wasn't just planning a trip, she was making a pilgrimage back to a feeling. She wasn't expecting to replicate that night, that was impossible. But she was opening the door to new stories, new quiet miracles. The backpack, once again full and ready by the door, wasn't just carrying gear. It was carrying hope and the quiet knowledge that peace was a place she could find, always, under a nylon roof and a wide, open sky. Part 19. The drive felt like a homecoming. Each mile marker, each familiar turn in the road, peeled back a layer of the city from Maya's spirit. The trees grew thicker, the air cleaner through the vents. When she pulled into the same forest parking lot, it was empty. The late spring sun filtered through new, vibrant green leaves. Stepping out, the silence was profound, broken only by a woodpecker's distant work and the whisper of wind in the canopy. She shouldered her pack, the familiar weight of comfort. The trailhead looked the same, yet utterly new under the bright sun. As she started walking, she noticed details she'd missed in the rainy twilight, wildflowers speckling the path's edge, the intricate architecture of a fallen log covered in moss and shell fungus. The memory of her rainy night walk overlaid the present like a transparent film, enriching it. She wasn't repeating the past. She was walking with it, adding a new, sunlit layer to the story. Part 20. She found the glade. In the full daylight, it was bigger, brighter than she remembered. The grass was lush and high, dotted with purple and white flowers. The pine trees stood as silent, evergreen sentinels. She walked to the center, her heart beating a little faster. This was the spot. The exact place where her tent had been, where a fox kit had slept on a blue pad. Kneeling, she ran her fingers through the grass. No paw prints now. No red fur. But the feeling remained, imprinted on the air. She set down her pack and just sat for a while, listening. The breeze sounded different without the drum of rain, softer, carrying the buzz of bees and the rustle of leaves. It was the same place, but a different world. She smiled. It was perfect. It meant her memory was safe, unique and untouchable, and now she was free to make a new one. Part 21. This time, setting up camp was a leisurely, sunlit affair. She pitched the tent on the same flat ground, the nylon rustling dryly. She aired out her sleeping bag in the sun, pegged out a small tarp to sit on, and hung her food bag from a high branch with practiced ease. The little toy fox watched from atop her pack. As the afternoon sun began to slant, she gathered dry twigs and pine cones, building a small, careful fire ring in a cleared spot of earth. Campfires weren't allowed during the dry summer, but this late spring evening was still damp enough. The ritual of building the teepee of kindling, the strike of the match, the first tentative curl of smoke, it was another form of crafting coziness. Soon, a small, crackling flame danced, its orange light a rival to the setting sun. The scent of wood smoke joined the scent of pine, writing a new chapter in the glade story. Part 22. Dusk descended, a gradual dimming of the green light to blue. Maya cooked a simple meal over the fire, the beans and sausages tasting like a feast in the open air. As the last light faded, the fire became the heart of her world, painting the surrounding trees in flickering, dancing amber. She pulled out her journal and, by firelight, began to write. Not about today, but about that night a year ago. She described details she feared she might forget, the exact pattern of the seam by her head, the sound of the fox kit's wet sniff, the feeling of the cool fleece pad under her palm when she pulled it back inside. Writing it down felt like sealing it in a bottle, preserving it perfectly. The new flames warmed her face while her words honored the old rain. The past and present sat together comfortably by the fire, two different kinds of warmth. Part 23. The fire burned down to glowing embers, a bed of pulsing orange constellations. Above, the real constellations emerged, sharper and clearer here than they ever were in the city. Maya lay back on the tarp, her head on a rolled-up jacket, and gazed up. The Milky Way stretched in a dusty river across the vast black sky. No rain tonight. Just an immense, starry silence. The coziness came not from sheltering from a storm, but from the profound feeling of being a small, welcomed part of this enormous, beautiful universe. A satellite tracked slowly across the zenith, a tiny moving star. She thought of her friends, her city, her life, all under this same sky. The memory of the rainy night was a bright, specific star in her personal constellation. And here, now, she was adding another. She fell asleep under the open sky, the embers sighing softly beside her. Part 24. She woke with the dawn, chilled and damp with dew, but utterly refreshed. The embers were cold gray ash. The sky was pale pink and gold. She stretched, her muscles stiff from the ground, but her spirit was light. She boiled water for coffee on her camp stove, the hiss and perk loud in the morning quiet. As she sipped the strong, hot coffee, she watched the glade wake up. A deer, delicate and gray, stepped silently from the trees at the far edge, drank from a puddle, and melted back into the shadows. The birdsong began, even more riotous than she remembered. This morning held no mystery guest, no dramatic reunion, just the simple, profound gift of a peaceful awakening in a place she loved. It was different, but it was equally good. The absence of the old story made space to appreciate the quiet beauty of the new one. Part 25. Packing up in the sun was easier, drier. She scattered the cold ashes of her fire, leaving no trace. She folded the dry tent, rolled the dry sleeping bag. The little toy fox got a spot in the top pocket of her pack, its bead eyes catching the sun. Before shouldering her load, she performed one last, small ritual. From her pocket, she took a handful of wildflower seeds she'd collected from a meadow on her hike in. She scattered them in a wide circle around the glade center, where her tents had been. A gift for the bees, for the next visitors, for the glade itself. It was a thank you, an offering of future beauty. She wasn't just taking memories, she was leaving a promise of return, woven into the very soil. With a final, grateful look around the sun-drenched clearing, she turned and walked back down the trail, her heart and her pack full, but in a lighter, brighter way. Part 26. The memory of the second trip settled beside the first in Maya's mind, not replacing it, but companioning it. Two bookends, one of water and sound, one of fire and stars. She found herself less often needing to actively recall them. Instead, they became a part of her foundation, a deep, calm reservoir she drew from unconsciously. At work, in a tense meeting, she would feel the solidity of the forest floor beneath her. In a crowded store, she'd remember the expanse of the starry sky. The memories had done their work, they had rewired her a little, teaching her nervous system the frequency of peace. The framed collage on her wall was no longer just a memento, it was a certificate, proof that she knew how to find that quiet place, inside and out. She was, in a steady, quiet way, forever a woman who had a tent in the woods, no matter where she was. Part 27. One rainy Sunday afternoon, months later, a notification popped up on her phone, a weather alert for the mountain region where her glade was. Heavy rainfall warning. Most people would see that and think of cancelled plans, muddy roads. Maya saw it and felt a thrill of connection. She imagined her glade right now, the first drops hitting the pine needles, the earth drinking deeply, the air filling with that electrifying scent. She imagined an empty tent there, not hers, but perhaps someone else's, providing that same perfect shelter. Or maybe no tent at all, just the forest receiving its bath. She didn't feel envy, she felt a kinship. She was connected to that patch of earth through memory, and knowing it was experiencing its beloved rain again felt like hearing news from an old friend. The rain outside her city window became more beautiful, a thread linking her to that distant, sacred space. Part 28. The story continued to live. Maya's friend, the one who had listened to the tale over tea, texted her a photo. It was a child's drawing, crayon on construction paper. A lopsided green triangle, a tent, under scribbles of blue, rain. Next to it, an orange splotch with 2 dots for eyes, a fox. Underneath, in wobbly letters, Maya's cozy night. Maya's eyes welled up. Her private memory had become a legend, a bedtime story for a child. It had sparked imagination, comfort, a sense of wonder. The cozy tent had been rebuilt in a child's mind, a shelter against monsters or bad dreams. She saved the photo, this new, beautiful iteration of her experience. The gift of that night was truly infinite. It was no longer just her story, it was a story in the world, doing its own gentle work. Part 29. Years have a way of passing. The red strand of fur in the compass faded to a pale gold, but the compass always pointed north. The tent fabric in the frame grew a little more brittle. Maya's life changed, new jobs, new relationships, new challenges. But the glade was a constant. She returned not every year, but when she needed to, and each time it gave her what she required, sometimes solitude, sometimes clarity, sometimes simple joy. She learned other trails, other forests, but the first glade was her heart's home in the wilderness. The rainy night was her origin story, the moment she learned the language of peace. It was the proof that magic wasn't in grand gestures, but in small, wet paws and the sound of water on fabric, in the decision to be still and listen. Part 30, the end of the part. An old woman now, Maya sits in her garden on a warm evening, a blanket over her knees. Her granddaughter, Lily, curls at her feet, listening. Tell me the story again, Nana. The fox story. Maya smiles, her eyes seeing not the garden fence, but a screen of pine trees in the dark. She begins, as she always does, with the sound. The first droplet hit the nylon roof of the tent with a soft click. As she speaks, she watches Lily's face. She sees the lantern light kindle in her eyes, feels the shared shiver at the scratch on the tent, shares the joy of the dawn reunion. The details are worn smooth with telling, like a favorite stone, but the heart of it, the coziness, the connection, the quiet magic, beats as strong as ever. When she finishes, Lily sighs a happy sigh. I want to have a night like that, she whispers. Maya takes her hand. You will, my dear. And you'll have your own stories. And maybe one day, you'll tell them to someone, too. The first star appears in the twilight sky. The story is complete, yet it never ends. It has been passed on, a perfectly crafted, 5-minute memory of a rainy night, now a seed planted in a new generation. It will weather storms, provide shelter, and grow. In Lily's imagination, a tent is being pitched, a lantern lit, and a gentle rain is beginning to fall on a nylon roof, forever. This video is good. Please like, subscribe, comment and share it to all your friends. Thanks a lot.